I feel it's important to recognize and send my gratitude to the deaf Asian community members and their hearing allies. The reason being is that individuals from both of these groups have consulted with me one-on-one, have had direct contact with students and given their time and energy, or have published videos sharing their cultural experiences and posted those to YouTube so that we could learn from them. They have taught us, they have described, they've explained each of their individual cultural histories and traditions. I'm also grateful for the 3 pattern designers who worked on the collaboration that created the Lunar Zodiac quilt pattern. Without that pattern, there's no way we could have made the quilt. So I'm grateful to all of these. This is a Lunar New Year poem celebrating the year of the rabbit in 2023 and describing the rabbit as a lucky animal. In this Lunar New Year poem, the student is describing the year of the tiger and describing the animal's distinct markings and describing the tiger as the king of the animals. This Lunar New Year poem describes the year of the monkey, which will come again in 2028, and notes that the monkey is known for being clever and mischievous. Explain the process in making the Lunar New Year Zodiac animal quilt, where the students chose which animals they wanted to sew. Our teacher Kayla made a slide and sent it to the various 8th grade classes, and on that Google slide the 12 animals were listed and students could volunteer to sew one of the individual animals and sign up for it. And 10 of the students signed up. And then luckily we had 2 teachers, Cindy Brunson and Stephen Peterson, who also agreed. So thanks to those teachers. So I'm going to talk about the thinking and planning process in preparing to sew the blocks. We had a selection of fabrics that we were limited to choosing from that range of colors. And then every student used the coloring pages that were in the pattern to design their animal. And then on the pattern pieces, they colored in colored pencil each of the pattern pieces to match their design. And then they cut out the pattern pieces so they're ready to be sewn on. So once our pattern pieces had been colored and prepared, we took the fabric that corresponded with the individual pattern piece and cut out a fabric shape that was slightly larger than what was on the pattern to allow for the seam allowance. We then cut out all the pieces for each part of the pattern and organized them in order and clipped them to the pattern pieces. And that way everything was prepared for when it was time to sew. So now it was time to sew. And as was just described, we had prepared all of the fabric. We had measured it, sometimes using the light box to make sure that our pieces were large enough. And so it was time to actually sew the pieces together using the paper as a foundation. And along that way, we had to trim the fabric to size. We had to align the pieces, sew, and then seam roll the seams so that everything would lay flat. And then we started the process again of folding the paper, trimming, and sewing. So once all of our pattern pieces had been sewn together and the block looked great, we would press it and then we would have to remove the papers from the back of the block. Removing the papers was not fun, especially if there's glue, because it really stuck to the fabric and we had to be careful that we didn't break any of the threads. Because, we spent all this time sewing it and we didn't want the thread to snap. The center portion of the quilt is a block that two students measured and cut out using rulers and a rotary cutter. They organized all of the pieces according to the pattern directions, and then our teaching assistant, Melissa, actually sewed the pieces together. So it was the first portion of the quilt that was completed, and that center block has the Chinese characters for a New Year blessing. And when the students were done piecing their individual animals, it was time to connect them all together to complete the quilt top. And the person who did most of the sewing for that process was our math teacher, Stephen Peterson. But Kayla did help Stephen a little bit. the homemade spray base, you're going to need these ingredients: water, flour, salt, and rubbing alcohol. First of all, you need 9 cups of water. Here we are measuring it. Then you're going to add the salt. 1 tablespoon of salt. No. Careful, careful, careful. Go ahead, pour it. And you need to stir the salt in so it dissolves. We weighed out our flour and it came to 90 grams of flour. And now we're going to mix that flour in with this remaining water. It's important that throughout this cooking process, you whisk the flour into the water. You ready to video? Whisk it really hard. What? The camera on me. What are you doing? Whisk it really hard and stop. Okay, now that it's cool, it's important to occasionally stir it again because you don't want a skin to form on the top of your solution. So continue to mix it every once in a while so it stays absorbed and it's cooled. So our mixture is now cool, and so what we do at the very last step is add in the rubbing alcohol, and that way it keeps it sanitized. So for this process, we need to cut the batting larger than the animal. And then, so we have the animal is the smallest size, and then we cut the batting so it's slightly larger than the animal. And now what we're doing is cutting out the backing fabric to be the largest. Scoot it over just a little bit. And now we're spraying the homemade spray base on the top layer and patting it down, making sure to get the edges nice and sealed. And tomorrow it'll be ready to sew. Lunar New Year is celebrated worldwide by different communities and countries. In our class, we focused on 3 Lunar New Year holidays: Chinese New Year, Seollal, and Tet. We focused on these 3 for 2 reasons. One being that we have middle school students this year who celebrate those, and we wanted them to be represented and see their culture and celebration in the display. And then also, for these 3 holidays, their countries of origin, the entire country celebrates the Lunar New Year holiday. So up until now, we've been focusing on our Chinese New Year quilt with the zodiac animals, and now we're gonna highlight the Seollal and Tet quilts that we made. excited to announce that I'm here at the San Mateo County Fair and our quilt won first place. That doesn't mean that it's the first out of all the quilts submitted, but it means that the judges feel that it's met the criteria for an excellent quilt and gave us a blue ribbon.